Hello, everyone in the room. Okay. So, who am I? This one, that one. So, knowing that you know seems fairly simple, right? And knowing the way things are. And one of the things that it's helpful to know is the end of thought. And that's different than trying to get rid of thought. Because I think all of us, as meditators, have gone through the battle of trying to get rid of thinking by either concentrating fiercely or distracting or whatever. But if you just like washing your hands and your mind's thinking about what you're going to do next week or something simple like that, you can remember, washing hands feels like this, and the end of thought feels like this. So you want to start to touch into the silence of no thought, but you don't want to do it by trying to get rid of thought, because that's already aversion, that's already tension, that's already tanha, craving. So the awakening to thought is a statement. Worry feels like this, or fantasy feels like this, whatever way you want. But then at the end of that statement, you okay, Brian? I gotta get some water. So the end of thought. And like the way I've been taught, Luang Sameru would say, well, take a thought. Today is Saturday, correct? Today is Saturday. And at the end of the thought, just stop and notice. No thought. Feels like this. That's nothing special, but thought is not continuous. It can seem continuous. It can seem relentless, in fact, right? But there are gaps in the thinking mind. And rather than reacting to thinking by more thinking or whatever, I think the idea of the awakened mind is, how can we get to the sense of thought as an object, rather than me being the thinker, and that I'm thinking too much and therefore I have to stop thinking. That whole construct doesn't work for me. But more and more seeing, that like this year I've had a good fortune of doing a lot of weaving. Actually, I've been very productive. I'm very proud of myself. And so I'm thinking of design and color and structure and all of that. So when I sit down and meditate, what comes up? Design, structure. It's natural, isn't it? That's what the mind does. And then I can say, well, it's not me doing it. It's just the way the mind has been conditioned to think, because that's what's been involved in. So that's simple. And so a planning feels like this. But then I try to go to the end of thought. What does no thought feel like? It feels like this. To the silence of awareness. Try to get familiar with that. Now, weaving designs are easy. Emotions are really difficult. So if in my family, in my culture, I've had some, let's say I do something regrettable. I yell at my in-laws or something horrible like that, or I make some mistake, then the memory of that will come up, and the memory will produce thinking. And it's a very, very strong memory of maybe my fault, as it were. Then the memory traces were very much ego-driven self. I'm not right, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that, and so on. And they're very, very strong. But there's still, it's not you doing it, I would say. It's just the way the mind is conditioned, it's doing it. So if you just try to solve these things on a kind of ego basis, that I shouldn't have done that, and I'm going to do this next time, I think you're still, there is some space for that, sure, but I think still the attention is in the wrong place. Intention should be just knowing This is what we call paticca samuppada. This is dependently originated thought. It's not me doing it. Because if it was true that I am doing it, then I wouldn't do it. Obviously, right? So, if you're doing thinking, then don't do it. Right? Okay, for the rest of the retreat, don't think. It doesn't compute when you think of it that way. So the way I see it, you're not doing it, but you're responsible. Because if you don't awaken, then of course that habit dominates. So it's habits. And habits are karma. That's what I look at as karma. Not vipaka karma. Vipaka karma is resultant karma. Well, I'd say habits are also vipaka karma. So when we use the word karma, it often sounds like fate. It's my karma to have a big nose or something like that. Or it's my karma to be a monk or whatever. But I don't find that really helpful. To me, that's just a doctrinal nicety. But what I find helpful is when I think of habit, and that if I engage in a habit of worry, and I don't take responsibility for the habit of worry, and if I don't figure that out, then the habit of worry, it's what's going to dominate consciousness further into the future. And that to me seems what kamma and vipaka kamma is about. I make intentions, heedless intentions. I'm not aware, and I think worrying thoughts. I keep just going into it, and that creates the habits of worry. And if you look at people who haven't developed an inner world, an inner sensibility, an inner silence, you can see at some point there's no more person there. There's just this ottoman going in their habits, and that's kind of frightening. And there's no longer is this individual really making any choices anymore? Do they just automatically go? This we see with elderly people. That's really, whoa, that's kind of scary. And so there is a kind of urgency always in Buddhism to awaken, right? To awaken to the way things are. If someone's worried and been determined to worry, or be, let's say, if someone's been hateful and resentful for 60, 70, 80 years, to say to them, don't do that. It's not going to happen. Even if they don't want to do that, they're going to tend to do that, unless maybe there's some accident of liberation that awakens their mind. It sounds very pessimistic, doesn't it? But what I'm trying to just say is that if we don't pay attention, then that inattention creates results. Results come from that. But then, contrary to blame ourselves, that I shouldn't be thinking and I shouldn't be worrying, and that's not Dhamma. That's still ego. I'm someone that shouldn't have this. So the whole idea of, say, dependent origination is that there are conditions which create causes, and the causes create results. But awareness itself is not a cause or a result. It's freedom. It knows the causality of the conditioned mind, but in itself, it's not the same, is it? Like, I listen to the lawnmower, and then the loud sound of the lawnmower creates a sense impression in my mind, and I react to it. If I'm not demanding, I say, oh, that's an interesting motor sound. Or if I'm attached to silence, oh, that's a terrible motor sound. But that's all just conditioned stuff, and I can know that. So in whatever habits of mind you tend to get caught up into, just try to awaken to the habit, I would suggest, and just know that's worry, it feels this way. And come to the end of that. Come to the end of the thought. Don't try to get rid of it. Come to the end of the thought. And keep expanding that gap. Keep making that gap more and more profound. Obviously, what we're always suggesting, it's always suggested is when you walk, right? When you sit, then sit. In other words, do what you're doing. If you're chopping veg, chop the carrots. If you're walking down the hall, walk down the hall. So there's always this kind of imperative to be present to the way things are. And you can make intentions about that. You can, like, just make an intention before you go to sleep to say, what's the mood of the mind? What is it like? You can make an intention when you're leaving your room to just be with a walking from the room to the bathroom or to the shrine room. You can make those intentions. And those little intentions are they're from compassion and kindness. They're not from a kind of drivenness. Like, you're not trying to but then as you make the intentions of mindfulness, then as the mind goes into its habit, you say, oh, thinking feels like this. Worry feels like this. And notice the end of the thought. And add that up to a day's practice, and you have a much more mindful consciousness. You're much more aware of your habits, and you've created good karma. You created the momentum to not get caught up in the habits of the mind. So it's tedious work, right? And you can get very frustrated with the habits of mind. But I don't see any other way to do this. I mean, if anyone's got a shortcut, right? Kind of, I'll join. I'll sign up. Don't you worry. There is a rigor to this, but it's not it's not a military rigor. Like, we really got to sit here and not move. And it's much more. I'd say it's much more beautiful now. It's more like craft. It's the craft of the heart. It's the craft of awakening. It's more like the craft of wonder. Just, it's like this. Rather than a judgment, it's like this. One of the things that I find very helpful in kind of patterning my own practice and making suggestions to myself is that the idea that this experience is in awareness. So I say that breath is in awareness, bodily feelings are in awareness, thoughts are in awareness. So for me, that kind of language gives a intuition about awareness, that awareness is infinite space, conscious infinite space. I know that's grand language, but like, if I sit here and I just listen and I say, what's the outer limit of awareness? I can't find it. Okay, what is the center of awareness? I can't find a center. But in that kind of questioning, it's not a philosophical thing. It's not an intellectual thing. It's an experiential thing. And so what I start to do is I start to emphasize awareness itself rather than the experiences within awareness. So this takes me to Yoga Nidra. Yoga Nidra is I'm not an expert. I just saw the word. It seemed like a cool word. It's for me, it's lying down meditation. And the way I have developed it is to take Sarvasana and take the language of awareness and see that the feelings of the body are in awareness. And that's the meditation I'd like to do shortly. So what I do is, and many of you know this, and this is a very good posture for meditation for those of us who are old and those of us who are in the departure lounge. Brian, close there. Okay, for all you youngsters, I know it doesn't matter. So, Sarvasana, you lay on your back, your palms on the bed or whatever, and then a good cushion, a bolster under your knees, and your neck and head well adjusted so that so that the chin is not forward or too far back. So you set up the posture like you would set up a full lotus posture, rather than just kind of flop down. Okay, let's meditate. Like you really do it very, very deliberately. And then you make your body as comfortable as possible. And then what I've always found helpful is you say to yourself quite deliberately, now adjust your posture 10% more. It's a kind of deliberate statement, 10% more. And then don't move. And that becomes the meditation, the don't move. And now, because you've made some very firm intentions about what the posture feels like, where you are in this territory, in this space, that you're not going to move. And then as soon as you after a few seconds, you'll feel something itching. You want to scratch it. You feel your shoulder could be a bit more comfortable. Your neck might be just a bit, and that's restlessness. But having said, don't move, not as a military command, but as a investigation, then that restlessness isn't acted on, and there's a chance for the mind to be stilled by knowing the body. And then from that posture, what I've learned, or the way I've done it, is I go through the body, and I feel various parts of the body, and I emphasize that this feeling is in awareness. Now this is different than the kind of vipassana techniques of focusing on a body part and focusing on this, and then that's not what I do. What I do is I make conscious some part of the body, and that's what we'll do in this meditation. I make it conscious by just knowing what it feels like and kind of reiterating in my own mind, this is in awareness. I might not use that language, I might. This feeling is in awareness. So as I go through the body, what I'm emphasizing is, like, the body is a kind of locality which helps to kind of anchor me into the present moment, but I keep emphasizing awareness, 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 awareness. So all the time I'm coming back to the background, knowing. That makes sense? Anyway, let's try some meditation.